Hello, good people. Thank you for supporting my channel. Please like, subscribe, and turn on the post notification bell for future content. Now, today I want to get into what are we teaching our children about wealth? Wealth is essentially any kind of asset that is passed down from one generation to the next. This may include cash, investment funds, stocks and bonds, real estate properties, or even businesses. It's imperative that we teach our children these things because the school systems and the university systems teach them absolutely nothing about finances. And I think that starts and stems with the No Child Left Behind policy. The No Child Left Behind policy is a policy for grade schools, K through 12. Now, shout out to you teachers out there, but teachers are required to teach to the test, meaning they're not teaching anything basically outside of the standardized tests requirements that the federal government put on the state funded schools in order to fund the schools. And if they don't teach to the test and pass these requirements that the federal government put in place, then our children, they won't get the funding for the schools. The schools will be defunded, discredited, and so the teachers, they teach to that curriculum to satisfy their requirements or their quota for the federal government. So teaching them finances and how to manage debt and other worldly subjects, those things are out the window simply because they have to teach to the test. They spend most of their days teaching to the test. So schools, grade school, cal- kindergarten through 12th grade teaches absolutely nothing, which means it leaves us on the parents, us parents, to teach our children how to navigate the world of finance, how to prepare for this, because at the end of 12th grade at 17, our kids are faced with these decisions on whether they want to take on anywhere from $30,000 to $150,000 in student debt for 4 to 5 years of undergrad in college. That is very expensive. And when you take a child that's 17 that does not know anything about debt or how to manage it, that they'll get into a world of trouble, and that directly affects their future. If they have $150,000 worth of debt coming out the gate, kids don't stand a chance. They don't stand a chance on buying assets. They probably default. Credit is messed up, and they don't know how to fix it. They don't know how to manage it because the teachers failed them and us parents failed them. So I believe that investing in your children is imperative because the schools and the universities, even when you get to college, when we got to college, you spend the first 2 years undergrad studying general education, aka a repeat of high school. I was so pissed off when I got to college and I felt like I was in high school again for another 2 years. And I wasted so much money, which I feel like. They say, well, you get a good return on your investment for college. In some cases, yes. In most cases, no. So investing in your children's education is imperative because, like I said before, the colleges and the grade schools do not teach it. So they walk into the world, the real world, and the reality of finances and debt slap them in the face in a rude way. And they get a rude awakening like most of us did in our mid 20s, early 30s, some even early 40s and 50s. Some don't learn these things until they're 60 when it's already too late and they're approaching retirement age. I mean, so teaching our kids is the most important thing because you don't want to wait until they get 30, 40, 50 years old, and then you start teaching them how to invest in stocks. They should have been investing in stocks right out the gate at 18. Can you imagine if you've been saving, if you're 40, 50 years old, if you've been responsibly saving since you were 18 years old, if somebody taught you the game at 18 years old, and you were responsible enough to save, let's say $400 a month. People average car notes these days are $1,000 a month. That's minus gas, maintenance, and all of that stuff. So if they could swing that, They could swing the $400 from 18 to 40 to invest, but most of us don't. Teaching them the importance of owning real estate, buying commercial real estate, how to as an investment vehicle, income property, passive income, taking advantage of life insurance. I can't understate how important life insurance is. For those who have it, they understand the importance of it, but that's the one little key factor that a lot of parents skip over: life insurance. Creating a business for them to pass it down. They may not stay in the industry that you create, but at least they'll be able to cash out on that business. Or if they're not in the direct industry, teach them how to operate a business. What software do you need? How do you manage? How do you make payroll? How do you order supplies? How do you do this? How do you source for products? Teach them all this stuff because, like I told you, college do not teach unless you're directly in a field specifically for financing or specifically for business. You don't get it. Absolutely not. In most cases, you do not get it. But for us parents, we have to ask ourselves, are we borrowing too much? Are we financing our kids' future off? Because if we're charging things that we can't afford today onto credit cards, that's just prolonging. That's taking our money into the future. We're paying off. We're taking now money that we're supposed to. It's debt. Oh my God. Your relationship with debt, your direct relationship with consumption, depends on whether you're going to have assets to pass on to your children. Now, when it comes to wealth, there is no magic number that equates generational wealth. If someone inherits $10 million, they can live happily and comfortably on $50K a year. That money can last forever. $50K a year, and when you retire, you have less expenses, you're consuming less. So that 50K can go a lot longer than it stretch a lot further than it can if you're younger and your economic habits are a little bit different. You're going out with your friends, you're doing this, you're doing that. So you're spending more. When you're retired, you're spending less for the most part in most cases. Now, on the other hand, if they blow through $1 million a year, that money will be gone pretty fast. And those are usually the people who inherit that money and they don't know. They just spend, spend, spend. Nothing coming back in through the front door, but everything's leaving out the back door. But the secret to wealth is simply having a plan and sticking to it. If you have a plan and you stick to it, your children should be fine. The difference between good debt and bad debt. How much is it? How much is enough to retire? What is inflation? Will your assets make it to the next generation? Those are all questions that I have swirling around in my head. And most people should at this point, because as millennials, we're at 40. We have 25 years before the retirement age, but yet we're in the prime of we're making money right now. And we should be taking that money and putting it into smart places, vehicles that'll take that money further into the future. But how most people destroy wealth, well, wealth can be destroyed in many ways, but when you have times like this where inflation is going up, wealth starts to disappear. When the cost of things go up, you have to pay more for those products, which means more money is leaving out of your household. And if you have no plan for production to put it back in, that's money that's leaving and there's no return on that money. And the higher the interest, anything you have that's attached to debt and the interest rates go up, your mortgage, everything, you can no longer afford it. That's what inflation means. Now, when inflation gets to going up too high, they stop quantitative easing, which is stimulus money, giving money out to people, and they start QT, which is quantitative tightening. They try to suck money out of the economy. They slow down people purchasing power. They slowing down economic growth because it's running up too high. The wealth effect is in full effect. Everybody's wealthy, money flying everywhere. So the government, the Federal Reserve, is like, no, 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 no. We can't have inflation going up this high. We need to bring it back down. And that is like very, I mean, the US is pretty stable right now, but in places like, let's say, I'll use the UK. The UK just had a recent pension scare. Pension is what people rely on when they retire. They paid their entire lives into this system, right? Well, the Bank of England, they, instead of United States Treasuries, which is our bonds, the United Kingdom has gilts. Same thing as bonds. A person like myself, an investor, says, okay, I have $10,000. I'm going to park my $10,000 in Treasury, government bonds, whether US or UK. I'm going to park it in there. And who thinks the government, the United Kingdom or the United States, is going to disappear in the next 10, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years and can't make good on those bonds or gilts? Nobody thinks that. So most people in most countries, most businesses, pension systems park their money into these safe assets, treasuries, bonds, gilts. Well, the United Kingdom, the Bank of England, had to bail out the pension system because it was about to crash. That means that people who are relying on their pension in this decade, it may not be there for them. So the Bank of England had to go in and bail them out. It's amazing. And people in the UK protested like crazy. This was the first time in a long time that the euro lost lost value to the US dollar. It plummeted. Scared the heck out of the UK. Still scaring them. And it's a pension system problem in the United States too. Most of us that pay into our pension systems, a lot of people are unassuming and don't know where the money in their pension system is invested in because they're relying on a manager to manage that for them. So they have literally no clue. But most of their money is in government bonds, invested on the stock market. That manager is trying to get a return on that money so that they could bring it back to the pool for the pension pool. And everybody benefits, right? But that's not always the case. And they've been gambling our pension money for a long, long time. And some states have actually been insolvent with their pension. Can't pay their pensioners. Social Security, can't pay them. But that's what happens. I mean, the United States, we had the 2008 mortgage crisis. And now we're walking into 2023 where it's potentially going to be 10 times worse. But that's the result of loose financial policy plus inflation that equals danger in the economy. That means something's about to fall, something's about to crash, and quantitative easing is no longer the solution. It has never really been the solution, but it really doesn't work because the more money that they print to stimulate the economy, the worse inflation is. The more money they put out there, the harder it is for the Federal Reserve to fight off inflation. And Lord Jesus, if the Federal Reserve lose the fight with inflation, we're talking about crashes, not here just in the US, crashes all across the globe. We're talking about a globalized system. Everything economics, everything trade, everything, it all implodes. And like I said, the United Kingdom alone. United Kingdom with Brexit, they broke away from the European Union. They're no longer a part of Europe for the most part. They're their own individual country. As they were before the European Union, but Brexit, they totally broke apart. They voted to break apart. And now the repercussions of a lot of that stuff, they're no longer protected by that. But the crash is going to affect the whole entire world. We're talking China's fragile, Japan is fragile, India, Turkey, Sri Lanka, parts of Africa, all types of places, they're all super fragile. But that's the crash. That's the crash crashing. That's when folks like myself who have portfolios, who have assets, that's when liquidity is pulled out of the market. Liquidity meaning cash. People get scared, like bank runs. They run to the stock market, they run to whatever assets and try to cash them out. Real estate is not as easy to cash out as stocks and bonds, but people start cashing out, pulling liquidity out for tough times that are coming. Stocks are falling, they're trying to stop their assets from falling to the floor, so they pull out. And when liquidity pulls out, that's when you see who's swimming naked, who invested badly, who used leverage. Leverage meaning debt. Sadly enough, you have people who mortgage out their homes. They get car title loans. They take out leverage on the stock exchanges. And all of that money has to be paid back. Older people taking out reverse mortgages. It's crazy. It's a bubble. It's a total debt bubble. And when that bubble pops and crashes, it's game over. It's game over for all countries. And that's how inflation can affect a whole economy. It's a triggering effect. Inflation is simply the rise of costs in products and services over a course of time. It doesn't happen overnight. It creeps up on you. And most people don't take heed to inflation until it's at their front door. Until their mortgage, they have a 5-year adjustable mortgage rate, and their 5 years is up, and their mortgage is about to adjust to the higher interest rate. And now they're screwed. They're screwed. The United States interest rate is 4.5% as of December 14th, 2022. 4%, 4.5. The United States inflation rate is at 7.1% as of November 2022. The U.S. Labor Department will release the next inflation update scheduled for release on January 12, 2023. Now, what are reasons for inflation? What can trigger it? We're talking population increase. Population increase. The world has what? 7.8 billion people. Now 8 billion people. When countries' population explodes, that's more mouths to feed. That's more things you have to import into your country. And when countries import things in, they have to pay for those imports. Imports aren't just flying around for free on good faith. No, they have to. And since we're the United States, we're the world reserve currency, mostly everything is paid with US dollars. That's why our central bank here, the Federal Reserve, is the basically next to the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, they're basically the World Bank. But another reason is population, like product scarcity. Speaking of trade, when products are hard to come by, that's economics 101, supply and demand. If the demand is high and the supplies are scarce, the supplies are going to cost more. It's going to go, the prices are up, inflation, and regular people cannot afford that. The rich can absorb it a little bit, but the poor working class cannot absorb that. It's already high, and then you add inflation onto it, it's higher. That directly affects the poor person. And then another reason can be global conflict, the war with Russia and Ukraine. That'll trigger inflation. You got Russia with all these sanctions. Ukraine, I mean, Ukraine is a special case because Ukraine used to be a part of Russia. But Ukraine is now trying to join NATO. And if Ukraine joins NATO, that's like a thorn in the Russian Federation's side. That's the one thing, that's why this whole war popped off. Global conflict. And that's not the only war popping off in the world. You have all kind of border wars all across the globe. China and India, they stay fighting on the border. India and Pakistan, they share a border. They're always fighting. Armenia, they always fighting with their border neighbor. Turkey and Syria, always fighting. And who's responsible for keeping that fighting at bay through defense funds and through the United States are. We pay $890 something billion a year for that to stay peaceful. But global conflict is definitely a trigger for inflation. Now, deflation, which rarely happens, is the cost of goods and services going down over time, just the opposite of inflation. So that's what they're trying to do right now, deflate the economy, quantitative tightening. They do that, the Feds stand a chance to win the battle with inflation. But if the Feds lose the battle with inflation, it's over. They're powerless. They can't do anything. It'll run away. And we see that in Turkey and Venezuela. There's nothing that they can do. Inflation ran away to the point where the government can't even catch it. To the point where the currencies are blowing, the dollar bills are blowing around the streets in Venezuela. They're so useless. People are using them as wallpaper. That's what happens when inflation goes from 7.1% in the US today. Venezuela, Turkey, we talking 50%, 100% inflation. Like, you can't afford anything. The country can't afford to import goods anymore. Sri Lanka, running out of gas, can't import anything. Asking the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, can they have a loan? Because the government cannot pay import. They cannot pay its bills. They cannot source for wheat and corn and everything, all the commodities they need to feed their population. Those things cost. And when inflation is up, that means the poorer countries suffer the most. What happens during an economic downturn? I told you, the Feds. If they lose this battle, the U.S. government defaults on their bonds. That's the inability to convert their treasuries to cash. That means they're not paying out the corporations, the regular folks like myself and households who've invested in bonds don't get their payouts. Other governments, Japan owns almost $1 trillion in U.S. treasuries. So is China. All the rest of these countries. Safe bet, remember? So everybody put their money into government bonds. Like I said, nobody thinks the government is going to implode and disappear in the next lifetime before they retire. So most people put their money there. But they can't meet their global obligation. They can't defend the waters with the Navy. They can't pay that 800 and something billion dollars a year for defense to protect global trade, globalization. They just cannot do it. A slowdown in China. China slowed down completely. That's going to be a domino effect. This could render central banks totally powerless. They can't do anything. A worse recession in 2008 housing crisis. That's what's going to happen. And the central banks, the Federal Reserve, they cannot come to the rescue this time. This is the one time that they won't be able to. And that's only if they lose the battle with inflation. It will be an ugly day across the entire globe. Sad, sad day. Will your assets make it to the next generation? Now, the baby boomers had an era of I'm talking about cheap money, low interest rates for about 40 years. Our parents, millennials, our parents, they enjoyed the benefits of buying a home low for cheap, buying a car for cheap. They got cheap money. That's why they own 80% of the US market. They were able to do that. Us millennials, we aren't so lucky. We got the raw end of the deal. 40 plus years of low interest rates. It all ended in 2028. But now, and the interest rates has been slowly creeping up. And like I said, the interest rates is at 4% now? 4%. Yeah. So 2023 is the perfect storm for a global financial crisis. I'm talking about everything trigger. I gave examples of All of the crises, and well, not even all, some of the crises that are happening across the world is more than that. And any one of those can trigger a recession. Any one. Loose monetary policies, yeah, war in Ukraine, trade wars. Now, when Trump was in office, Trump initiated most of the trade wars. Biden got in and kept the trade war going. And it's never eased up since. We've been fighting with China. Businesses been pulling out of China. China competing with India and Vietnam and all of this for market share in manufacturing, providing products to the world. Companies are literally pulling out of China and going to India, Venezuela. Well, not even Venezuela because they're in an economic crisis. Um, India, Paraguay, Vietnam, you name it, different places. They all pulling out of China. I never thought I'll see this in my lifetime, at least not this early in my lifetime, but it is happening. It's happened. I think Apple was the last the last company to pull out. They're pulling out as of now. Walmart even pulled out. Walmart has been in China since the mid 90s, I believe. China pulled out. When Walmart pulls out of China, that should be the writing on the wall for any other business that follows to get the heck out. And a lot of them didn't take the warning. A lot of them did not, including Apple. And now Apple is moving manufacturing facilities to India. Now remember I told you India and China all they share a border. They're always fighting each other. And now India is taking market share in manufacturing from China. Now see China demographically has the biggest country. We talking 1.4 billion people. But China, India right next door is second largest, 1.3 billion people. So India has just as many people as China. And India is younger than China. China's aging just like Japan, just like Europe. And the only thing that kind of saves the United States is immigration. We open up our borders to immigration. So that saves us. But the world itself, there's not a lot of millennials. Our baby boomers, our parents, they had a lot of babies. But in other countries, they couldn't afford to have a lot of babies. China had one child policies. They restricted their citizens from having a lot of babies. So that right there directly affects their ability to even keep up with manufacturing. So China and everything else is going to trigger so many things going on in the world. And I say when to start teaching our kids about all this stuff, how to invest, how to preserve wealth, ASAP. ASAP. Wealth takes, I mean, rich people or people, not, I'm not even going to say rich people, people in general who have assets to pass down to their kids. One thing they forget to pass down is the financial education along with the money. That's how most generations, by second and third generation, have lost everything. By the second and third generation, because they did not teach their children how to maintain the wealth, how to put it in other investment vehicles, how to keep the vehicle going, how to put gas in the vehicle, the investment vehicle, and keep it moving to the next generation. How not to crash the vehicle before it gets to the next generation. Because if you crash the vehicle before it gets to the next generation, your kids are going to be there standing with their hands out and nothing's going to show up. Because you didn't protect it. You didn't protect the vehicle. You didn't ensure that whoever you left to control that vehicle knew what to do. They were reckless. They drove the car off the cliff. Yeah. So, I don't know. The first step to earning enough money to cover you have to earn enough money to cover your basic needs, but you want to make sure you have enough money left over for saving. If you don't have enough money left over for saving, what are we doing? Invest it in assets for the long haul. Don't just sit your money there thinking you're going to get a come up in the next 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years. It takes longer than that for an investment to grow. Even starting a business, it takes what, 3 years on average, 3 to 5 years before you're successful and actually profitable in your businesses. And most businesses are not successful. Majority of them fail within the first year, 2 years, 3 years. Only the ones that make it to the 3, 5 year mark have better chances of succeeding and passing that business down to the next generation. All the rest of them go out of business. And businesses have been closing like crazy since 2020. I don't know if y'all been paying attention to it, but I have. Oh, and I was so sad to see my Michaels on the list. I'm going to say that as a little caveat. My little arts and crafts store, Michael. I could spend hours in that store. Yo, I seen Michael's on the list. I nearly cried. I said, no, is Michael's disappearing? Yes. Closing stores. Macy's, closing stores. I mean, you have stores like that that can't compete with the Amazons and the Walmarts of the world. So they closing down like crazy. There's no foot traffic in the malls. They can't get people to lease commercial spaces in the mall because the anchor stores like the JC Penney's, the Macy's I just mentioned, they're going out of business. They're not renewing their leases in the malls. And those, like I said, are the anchor stores. Those are the anchor stores that pull in the foot traffic. People come for the Macy's, the JC Penney's, the other big stores. And then the smaller stores that we rarely know about, they get the spin-off money just by, way of people walking from one point to the next. Oh, I see something in that window. Oh, that looks cute. So they get the residual, money off of that. But they can't get business owners to renew their leases. So malls as we know it totally changed. But that's what happens in an economic downturn. What would be your financial legacy? Let's see. Creating and building generational wealth. I got a few steps here now. Adopt a big growth mindset, because when you're learning about finances and riches and things like that, you have to first start off with changing how you think about money. How you process money in your head is very important. So you change your mindset and your perception on money and how to earn it and how to grow it. That's the first step, right? Have a clear plan for your money. Like I said, those investment vehicles. Invest ASAP. ASAP. Diversify your portfolio. Make sure that vehicle gets to the next generation. Make sure that vehicle is full of cash or full of assets, paper assets that'll get to your children. It's your responsibilities to do that. Buy real estate as an investment. Income property. I could get into that, but it's a reason why the rich get richer and stay rich. They understand how to play the game. And like I said in previous videos, some of us don't learn how to play the game until 30, 40, 50, sometimes 60 years old. Can you imagine getting to 40 years old and you realize the game you've been playing your whole life with money, your perception on debt, your perception on money is all wrong. Totally wrong. You've watched your parents struggle, so you see debt as a bad thing and it's scary. The rich don't see it like that. Debt is a great thing. That's good debt for rich people. They use debts as a form to generate income. Poor people use debt to buy things to basically finance the future. That's the difference between good debt and bad debt. You're buying tennis shoes and clothes and jewelry and purses and all of this stuff. No, that's bad debt. It gets you nothing. You get no return on that other than what, looking good. You get no return on that. But if you saved up some money, took that and bought an investment property, then what? Your story is different. Yeah. Be aware when putting a savings plan in place. How are you going to save? How are you going to reduce your consumption? How are you going to budget? Because remember, the secret to wealth is having a plan. Having a plan and sticking to that plan. Get life insurance. Life insurance. Life insurance. Life insurance. Can't understate that. Pay your taxes. A lot of people get rich and they forget that one little thing. Pay your taxes. They get cut $1 million check. Now, federal government and state government, two separate taxes you have to pay. Depending on where you are, your state taxes may be more or less. Places like Florida and Texas, they have no income tax. They have no state taxes. But places like here in California, you're going to pay a nice little chunk. 10, 15%. And then the federal government come knocking for what, 25 to 35%? For a rich person, that's nearly 50% of your income. So if you got cut $1 million check, anywhere from $350,000 to $500,000, you need to cut that check to the IRS, to the U.S. Treasury, and you need to cut it ASAP. And some people like, I don't want to let go of this $500. I don't want to let go of this $350. I'm gonna wait. They ain't gonna know this. I ain't gonna trip off of it. I'll pay it later. Well, later becomes never, and then you get that letter in the mail, and the government say, yeah, we know it's been 4 or 5 years. We've been backlogged. We've been understaffed, but we've been watching. We kept a record, and we need our money. That's how the government makes their money. You think they forgot about you? No, they didn't. And most rich people get caught up with not paying taxes. It's amazing. But what you do today will determine how you leave your legacy for tomorrow. Teaching your offspring. Changing their mindsets about money. How to build wealth. Building from nothing. If you build from nothing, you'll appreciate it more than get inherited something and you screw it off before the second and third generation. They just will not appreciate it. And an example with that is I learned through investigating the Rockefellers. And I wondered why the Rockefeller dynasty is no longer as rich as they were. Rockefeller was once the richest man in the world. Now his family pretty much has nothing because his legacy was nobody produced anything after him. Everybody just consumed. Money flew out the window. Nobody produced nothing. So every Rockefeller, the name is synonymous with wealth, fame, popularity. But on them balance sheets, in that portfolio, not rich at all. I mean, not at all. They'll be lucky if an heir can touch $1 million. When their great-great-grandfather was worth hundreds of billions of dollars. Like, seriously? But nobody produced anything. That's where the education with money comes in at. How money works. How do I produce something to generate more of it? How do I put it in an investment vehicle to make sure that it gets to the next generation? None of the Rockefellers did it. Only the grandfather who generated the money in the first place. It lasted him up to this long because he had a nice big pot of money. But that pot of money is done. It was amazing when I learned that story. Get a regular source of income. Show them how to create a budget. You lead by example. Us parents and guardians, these kids are watching us. Like I said, most of us watched our parents struggle, and we looked at debt as a bad thing, or we looked at everything as bad because we watched our parents suffer. That don't have to be our story. It don't have to be our kids' story. Teach them the importance of life insurance, but not to over-insure. And some people will overinsure. They will overinsure, which can be good, but yeah, no. Just slow it down. Teach them to practice extreme saving, building an emergency fund. Teach them to explore passive income ideas. These are all things that it's up to us as the parents and the guardians to teach our kids these things. Don't let your baby find out the hard way. Financial realities of life. It'll hit them in their face, quick, hard, rudely, abruptly. And they gonna look back and be like, my parents didn't teach me this. The schools didn't teach me this. Make it easier from them and give them a great head start. Give them a great head start. They'll appreciate it in the future. But until next time, we're going to keep digging in this stuff. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Please like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. I'll be back. See you guys next time.